When I discovered my own sister had been secretly draining my trust fund for 3 years while I studied abroad, I thought that was the worst betrayal possible. But finding her and 12 strangers partying in my inherited villa, selling my grandmother's antiques online, and claiming she owned the property, that shattered every assumption I had about blood loyalty. The sister I defended my entire life had been systematically destroying everything our family built, and she was about to learn that some lessons come with consequences that last forever. Hey everyone, before we dive into this wild family revenge story, drop a comment, letting me know where you are watching from. If you have ever dealt with family betrayal or someone taking advantage of your trust, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more shocking family drama stories. Trust me, you will want to see how this sister got exactly what she deserved. My name is Serafina Blackwood, and I never imagined that coming home early from my master's program in London would expose the most devastating betrayal of my life. The villa in Napa Valley was supposed to be my sanctuary, the place my grandmother Evelyn left me when she passed 2 years ago. It was my inheritance, my future, and according to the legal documents, mine alone. I had been studying international business at Cambridge for 3 years, funded by the trust fund my grandmother established for my education. My sister Madison had always been jealous of what she called my princess treatment, but I thought we had worked through those childhood resentments. She was 28, 3 years older than me, and had always struggled to find her path in life. While I was academic-focused, she was creative, bouncing between art projects, failed startups, and short-lived relationships. The first red flag came when I tried to access my trust fund account online and found it nearly empty. $300,000 had been systematically withdrawn over the past 18 months. When I called the bank from London, they confirmed that Madison, who was listed as an emergency contact from when I was a minor, had been making withdrawals using forged authorization letters. She had been bleeding my education fund dry while I lived on student loans and part-time jobs, believing my trust fund was being preserved for emergencies. But the real shock came when I arrived at San Francisco International Airport on that October afternoon. Instead of calling Madison to pick me up as planned, I decided to surprise her by taking an Uber directly to the villa. I had not been home in over a year, and I was excited to see the property that would soon become my permanent residence after graduation. The Uber driver seemed confused when we pulled up to the address. The wrought iron gates that grandmother had installed were wide open, and at least 15 cars lined the circular driveway. Music pounded from inside the house, and people I did not recognize were lounging around the pool, drinking from wine glasses that looked suspiciously like my grandmother's crystal collection. My heart stopped when I saw the signs. Professional-looking banners hung from the balcony, reading, Villa Evelyn, Event Space Available, and Madison Blackwood Events, Premium Venue Rentals. My sister had turned my inheritance into a business without my knowledge or consent. I paid the driver and wheeled my suitcase through the open gates, my anger building with every step. The beautiful fountain that grandmother had imported from Italy was filled with empty beer bottles, and someone had carved initials into the antique wooden doors. This was not a simple party gone wrong. This was systematic destruction of my inheritance. Madison spotted me through the crowd and her face went white. She was wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly living expenses in London, her hair professionally styled, playing the part of the successful entrepreneur. The smirk on her face told me everything I needed to know. She had been caught, but she was not sorry. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" she called out, approaching me with fake enthusiasm. "I thought you were not coming back until Christmas." "What am I doing here? This is my house, Madison. What are you doing here with all these people?" My voice carried over the music and several party guests turned to stare. She grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the house. "We need to talk privately. You are making a scene." As we walked through what used to be my grandmother's pristine living room, I saw the full extent of the damage. The Persian rugs were stained with wine, someone had burned cigarettes into the antique coffee table, and the walls had holes where my grandmother's artwork used to hang. Madison had been selling everything piece by piece. "Where are grandmother's paintings?" I demanded. Madison's mask finally slipped. "Look, Sarah, you have been gone for 3 years. Someone had to maintain this place. Do you have any idea how expensive the property taxes are? The maintenance costs. I have been keeping this place from falling apart while you played student in Europe. You stole my trust fund money, the money grandmother left specifically for my education. I borrowed it," she snapped, "and I have been paying it back by turning this place into a profitable business. You should be thanking me for increasing the property value." That was when I noticed the stack of contracts on the kitchen island: event booking forms, payment schedules, and what appeared to be rental agreements. Madison had not just thrown a few parties, she had established an entire illegal business using my property. She was charging premium rates for wedding receptions, corporate retreats, and private parties, all while I struggled financially in London. The final straw came when I found the real estate consultation documents. Madison had been meeting with agents about selling the villa. My inheritance, my future, my grandmother's legacy. She was planning to liquidate it all and disappear with the profits. "You were going to sell my house," I whispered, holding the paperwork with shaking hands. "Our grandmother left this place to both of us," Madison lied smoothly. "The will was unclear about the specifics. I have just as much right to make decisions about this property as you do." That was completely false, and we both knew it. Grandmother's will explicitly left the villa to me alone with a smaller cash inheritance for Madison. The trust fund was separate, designated specifically for my education with clear legal language about authorized withdrawals. I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Madison, I want you to repeat what you just said about the will being unclear." "Stop recording me!" she shrieked, lunging for my phone. But it was too late. I had everything I needed to expose her lies and begin the fight for my inheritance. The sister I had defended and supported my entire life had been systematically stealing from me while I struggled to build my future. The betrayal cut deeper than I ever imagined possible, but it also sparked something dangerous in me: the absolute determination to make sure she faced consequences for every single thing she had stolen. The next morning, I woke up in a hotel room instead of my own bed because Madison had refused to kick out her paying guests. She claimed they had booked the villa for the entire weekend and that forcing them to leave would damage her business reputation. My business reputation built on my property using my stolen money. The audacity was breathtaking. But I had not spent 3 years studying international business law for nothing. I knew exactly how to dismantle her illegal operations systematically and publicly. The first step was gathering irrefutable evidence, and Madison had made that remarkably easy by leaving a paper trail that would make any prosecutor weep with joy. I started by visiting the county clerk's office to pull all public records related to the property. The villa was definitively registered in my name alone, with no ambiguity about ownership. Next, I requested copies of all business licenses filed in the county. Madison had never registered Madison Blackwood Events as a legitimate business, which meant she had been operating illegally while avoiding taxes on her substantial income. The bank records were even more damaging. With the help of my lawyer, Marcus Rivera, we documented every unauthorized withdrawal from my trust fund. Madison had forged my signature on dozens of authorization forms, created fake emergency scenarios to justify large withdrawals, and even impersonated me during phone calls to bank representatives. This was not borrowing, this was systematic fraud that had been going on for over 2 years. But I wanted more than legal victory. I wanted public accountability. Madison had always been the golden child in our extended family's eyes, the creative free spirit who deserved support and understanding, while I was seen as the privileged one who had everything handed to her. It was time for everyone to see who she really was. I created a comprehensive social media campaign that would expose every detail of her betrayal. First, I posted side-by-side photos on Instagram, the villa as grandmother left it versus its current trashed condition. The contrast was shocking: elegant antique furnishings replaced by cheap rental furniture, Pristine gardens now littered with party debris and obvious damage to architectural details that could never be fully repaired. The caption read, "When you trust family to respect your inheritance while you are studying abroad, but they turn your grandmother's legacy into their personal ATM and illegal party business." 3 years of systematic theft, fraud, and property destruction. Some family betrayals deserve public accountability. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Distant relatives who had always favored Madison began commenting with shock and outrage. Grandmother's friends from the community who had been watching the property deteriorate finally felt safe to speak up about what they had witnessed. Former high school classmates who remembered Madison's jealousy toward me shared their own stories of her manipulative behavior. But the real power move came when I tagged every single person who had attended parties at the villa. Thanks to Madison's social media addiction, she had posted hundreds of photos and videos showcasing her successful events business. I had names, faces, and evidence that dozens of people had participated in what they now knew was an illegal operation using stolen money. The pressure intensified when local news picked up the story. A young woman studying abroad, while her sister systematically destroys her inheritance, made for compelling television. Madison had been so public about her fake business success that journalists had no trouble finding evidence of her elaborate deception. The interview I gave to Channel 7 was devastating for Madison's reputation. I sat in grandmother's garden, surrounded by the damage she had caused, and calmly explained how my sister had stolen my educational funding while I took on crushing student debt. I showed the forged documents, the illegal business contracts, and the real estate consultation papers proving she had planned to sell my inheritance without my knowledge. "My sister did not just steal money," I said directly to the camera. "She stole my future, my security, and my ability to honor my grandmother's memory. She turned a family legacy into her personal playground while I struggled financially in a foreign country, believing I had family support waiting for me at home." The public response was swift and merciless. Madison's social media accounts were flooded with comments calling her a thief, a fraud, and a disgrace to her family. Local businesses that had worked with her event planning company began demanding refunds, realizing they had been complicit in an illegal operation. The prestigious country club where she had been networking dropped her membership immediately. Most importantly, the extended family members who had always enabled Madison's behavior began to see the truth. Our Aunt Patricia, who had previously criticized me for being too focused on money and success, called to apologize and offer her full support. Cousin Derek, who had loaned Madison money multiple times, realized he would never see repayment because she had been spending other people's stolen funds. Madison tried to fight back with her own social media campaign, claiming I was exaggerating the situation and that she had genuinely been trying to preserve the property. She posted carefully curated photos showing maintenance work she had done, conveniently omitting the fact that she had funded it with my stolen money. She painted herself as the responsible sister who had sacrificed her own opportunities to take care of family obligations while I lived selfishly abroad. But her narrative fell apart when I released the recorded phone calls. I had been documenting every conversation with Madison since discovering her theft, and her own words condemned her. The recording where she admitted to borrowing my trust fund money while planning to sell the villa went viral on TikTok. Her casual dismissal of my financial struggles, combined with her arrogant assumption that she deserved my inheritance, revealed her true character to everyone. The legal pressure was mounting as well. The district attorney's office opened an investigation into the fraud charges, and the IRS began examining her unreported income from the illegal business operation. Madison was facing potential felony charges that could result in serious prison time, not to mention the civil lawsuits from clients who had paid for services using a property she did not legally control. But the most satisfying moment came when she finally called me, crying and desperate. "Sarah, you have to stop this. My life is falling apart. I made mistakes, but you are destroying my future over money." "Over money," I repeated incredulously. "Madison, you stole my education fund while I lived on ramen noodles in London. You trashed our grandmother's legacy while I mourned her death alone in a foreign country. You were going to sell my inheritance and disappear with the profits. This was never about money. This is about justice. The conversation ended with her begging me to drop the charges and accept a payment plan for the stolen money. She promised to stop the business operations and return the property to its original condition. She swore she had learned her lesson and would never betray family trust again. I told her it was too late for private negotiations. She had made the situation public with her illegal business and social media bragging. Now she would face the public consequences of her actions. The sister who had counted on family loyalty to protect her from accountability was about to learn that some betrayals destroy that protection forever. What I did not expect was how quickly the situation would escalate beyond a simple family dispute. Within a week of my social media campaign, I was contacted by people I had never met who had been affected by Madison's broader pattern of deception. It turned out that stealing from me was just the tip of the iceberg. My sister had been running multiple cons simultaneously, and my public exposure had given her other victims the courage to speak up. The first person to reach out was Elena Vasquez, a wedding photographer who had worked several events at the villa. She had noticed inconsistencies in Madison's story about property ownership, but had not wanted to create conflict with a paying client. When she saw my posts, she realized she had documentation that could be crucial to building a legal case. Your sister told me she inherited the villa from a distant relative who died without other heirs, Elena explained during our coffee meeting. She said you were some kind of estranged cousin who might try to cause legal problems, but that she had full ownership rights. She actually warned me not to mention the business to you if I ever met you. Elena's detailed records revealed the scope of Madison's operation. Over 18 months, she had hosted 43 paid events at the villa, charging between $5,000 and $15,000 per event. The total revenue was staggering, over $400,000 that she had never reported as income. She had been living lavishly while I struggled with student loans, all funded by money stolen from my trust fund and profits from illegal use of my property. The second ally was unexpected but incredibly valuable. James Morrison was a real estate attorney who had been approached by Madison about expediting a property sale. She had initially claimed to be the sole heir, trying to liquidate an inherited asset quickly, but something about her story raised red flags for him. She was too eager to close quickly and too vague about the property's history, James explained. When I researched the title, I found your name as the clear owner. She became agitated when I asked about getting your signature on the sale documents and eventually stopped returning my calls. James had kept detailed notes about their meetings, including Madison's statements about planning to relocate to another state once the property sold. She had not just been stealing from me, she had been preparing to disappear entirely with the proceeds. This evidence would be crucial for proving intent and premeditation in the fraud charges. The third ally was the most personally meaningful. Sarah Kim had been grandmother's neighbor and close friend for over 20 years. She had been watching the property deterioration with growing concern, but had not known how to contact me while I was abroad. Your grandmother would be heartbroken, Sarah told me with tears in her eyes. She was so proud of you, always showing pictures from your studies and talking about how you would carry on the family legacy. Madison told everyone that you had decided to sell the villa because you were too busy with your European lifestyle to care about family history. Sarah had been documenting the parties and business activities with photos and dates, creating an invaluable timeline of Madison's illegal operations. She had also overheard Madison on multiple phone calls bragging about finally getting what she deserved from the family fortune and making plans to expand her event business to other properties. As our alliance grew, we uncovered evidence that Madison's betrayal was even more systematic than I had initially realized. She had been manipulating family relationships for years, spreading lies about my character and ambitions to justify her actions. She told our relatives that I was selfish and materialistic, caring more about money than family bonds. She portrayed herself as the devoted sister who had sacrificed her own opportunities to maintain family responsibilities. Marcus Rivera. My attorney was impressed by the quality of evidence we had gathered. I have seen family fraud cases before, but usually the documentation is incomplete or the victims are reluctant to pursue justice. You have built a case that any prosecutor would love to take to trial. The criminal investigation was progressing rapidly, but I wanted to ensure that Madison faced social consequences as well as legal ones. The alliance we had built began reaching out to everyone in Madison's network: friends, business contacts, romantic interests, and extended family members. We were not seeking revenge through gossip, but rather ensuring that people who might be future victims understood her pattern of deception. The response was immediate and devastating for Madison. Her longtime friend group distanced themselves after learning about the theft and fraud. The man she had been dating for 6 months broke up with her when he realized the expensive gifts she had given him were purchased with stolen money. Even her yoga instructor and personal trainer stopped working with her when they understood how she had funded her lifestyle. But the most significant development came when we discovered Madison's exit strategy. Elena found text message conversations where Madison had been planning to blame me for the property damage and business losses. She intended to claim that I had sabotaged her legitimate business operations out of jealousy and sibling rivalry. She was preparing to file her own lawsuit against me, seeking damages for interference with business relationships and property destruction. The audacity was breathtaking, but it also revealed how calculated her deception had been. This was not a desperate sister making poor decisions under pressure. This was a systematic con artist who had been planning every move for years. She had built her entire defense strategy around portraying me as the villain, while positioning herself as the victim of sibling jealousy. However, Madison had made one crucial mistake. She had confided her real plans to Derek, our cousin, during a family barbecue the previous summer. Derek had been uncomfortable with the conversation, but had not realized the full implications until my social media posts revealed the truth. "She told me that you thought you were better than the rest of the family because of your fancy education," Derek explained during our phone call. "She said you would try to take the villa away from her when you came back, but that she had lawyers who could prove she had stronger claim to the property." She was really confident about having some kind of legal strategy prepared. Derek's testimony would be crucial for proving premeditation and undermining any attempt by Madison to claim ignorance or desperation. She had been planning this betrayal for over a year, carefully building her defense while systematically stealing from me. The momentum was building toward a confrontation that would determine not just the legal outcome, but the future of our entire family dynamic. Madison had spent years manipulating relationships and controlling narratives, but now she was facing an alliance of people who had witnessed her deception firsthand. The sister who had counted on family loyalty and social manipulation to protect her was about to discover that truth has a power that eventually overcomes even the most carefully constructed lies. But I was about to learn that building alliances in family conflicts comes with its own risks, and that not everyone who claims to support justice is willing to maintain that support when the personal costs become real. Just as we were preparing to present our comprehensive evidence to the district attorney, I received a phone call that shattered my confidence in everything we had built. Elena Vasquez, the wedding photographer, who had been one of my most crucial allies, was crying hysterically on the other end of the line. "Sarah, I am so sorry. I never wanted this to happen, but Madison contacted me yesterday with information that could destroy my business. She has photos and documentation that could prove I was complicit in her illegal operations, even though I genuinely believed she owned the property." My blood ran cold. What kind of documentation? Email exchanges where I acknowledged working multiple events at the villa. Text messages where I agreed to keep the business arrangements confidential. She even has recordings of conversations where I discussed expanding our working relationship to other properties she claimed to own. Elena explained that Madison had been systematically documenting every interaction with her vendors and clients, not just for business purposes, but as insurance against potential betrayal. She had created a web of mutual incrimination that made it dangerous for anyone to testify against her without risking their own legal exposure. She told me that if I continue cooperating with your case, she will report me to the state licensing board for working unlicensed events and failing to verify property ownership. My photography business is everything to me, Sarah. I have a mortgage, car payments, and my daughter's college tuition depending on my income. The conversation lasted 2 hours with Elena alternately apologizing and explaining why she could not afford to risk her professional license. Madison had offered her a deal: cease all cooperation with my case and delete any evidence she had gathered in exchange for Madison's silence about Elena's unwitting participation in the illegal business operations. But Elena's betrayal was just the beginning. Over the next 3 days, I watched our carefully built alliance crumble, as Madison systematically contacted each ally with personalized threats and incentives to withdraw their support. James Morrison, the real estate attorney, received a different kind of pressure. Madison had hired a high-powered law firm and was threatening to sue him for defamation and professional misconduct if he continued providing information for my case. She claimed that his failure to maintain client confidentiality about their initial property discussions violated attorney-client privilege, even though no formal representation had ever been established. "I want to help you," James explained during our emergency meeting, "but I cannot risk my bar license over a family dispute. Madison's new lawyers are arguing that any information I provided to you was obtained through privileged communications, and they are prepared to file formal complaints with the State Bar Association." The most devastating betrayal came from Derek, my own cousin, who had provided crucial testimony about Madison's premeditated planning. Madison had discovered that Derek had been having financial difficulties with his construction business and was behind on several loan payments. She offered him a substantial cash payment, funded of course by money stolen from my trust fund, in exchange for recanting his testimony and claiming he had misunderstood their previous conversations. "She is family, Sarah," Derek said weakly when I confronted him about his sudden change of position. "I know what she did was wrong, but destroying her life is not going to fix anything. Maybe you two can work this out privately without involving the courts." Derek's betrayal cut deeper than the others because it represented everything that had enabled Madison's behavior throughout our lives. The family loyalty that protected her from consequences, the willingness to minimize her actions to preserve peace, and the expectation that I should be the bigger person and forgive devastating betrayals for the sake of family harmony. Within a week, I found myself virtually alone again. Sarah Kim, grandmother's neighbor, remained supportive, but her testimony alone would not be sufficient to prove the scope of Madison's fraud. Marcus Rivera assured me that we still had strong evidence for the criminal case, but acknowledged that the civil case had become significantly more complicated without witness testimony. Madison was emboldened by her success in dismantling my alliance. She began posting on social media again, carefully crafting a narrative about family reconciliation and the importance of forgiveness. She shared old photos of us as children, wrote lengthy captions about sibling bonds surviving temporary misunderstandings, and positioned herself as the mature sister trying to heal family wounds. "Sometimes families go through difficult periods," she wrote in one particularly manipulative post. "I am grateful that my sister and I are working through our differences privately and finding ways to honor our grandmother's memory together. Blood is thicker than water, and love ultimately conquers all disagreements." The comment section was filled with praise for her grace under pressure and criticism of my vindictive behavior. People who had never met either of us felt qualified to judge the situation based on her carefully curated version of events. Former allies who had withdrawn their support began liking her posts, further legitimizing her narrative. But Madison's greatest tactical victory was convincing our parents to intervene. They had been staying out of the conflict, claiming they did not want to take sides between their daughters. However, Madison's campaign had painted me as the aggressor who was tearing the family apart over money, while she was the victim trying to preserve family relationships. "Sarah, this has gone too far," my mother said during a painful phone call from Florida. "Your sister made mistakes, but she is trying to make things right. This public campaign is embarrassing for the entire family, and it needs to stop before permanent damage is done. My father was more direct. Madison has offered to pay back the trust fund money over time and return the property to you. That is more than fair considering she has been maintaining the place for years. Drop the criminal charges and work this out like adults. Neither parent wanted to hear about the systematic nature of the fraud, the extent of the property damage, or Madison's plans to sell my inheritance. They had bought into her narrative, completely choosing to believe that this was a sibling disagreement that had gotten out of hand, rather than acknowledging the calculated betrayal of their youngest daughter. The pressure to accept Madison's generous settlement offer was overwhelming. I was facing mounting legal costs, social isolation, and family rejection if I continued pursuing justice. Madison had successfully portrayed herself as the reasonable sister offering compromise, while I appeared stubborn and vengeful for refusing to accept partial restitution for complete betrayal. Standing in the damaged villa that should have been my sanctuary, I realized that Madison had not just stolen my money and property, she had stolen my family's support system and my community connections. The sister who had always been jealous of my achievements had finally found a way to turn everyone against me while positioning herself as the victim. But what Madison did not understand was that her tactical victory in destroying my alliance had also revealed the true character of everyone involved. The people who abandoned me when supporting justice became personally costly were never really allies at all. They were fair-weather supporters who wanted to feel good about standing up for what was right, but only when it required no real sacrifice. Madison thought she had won by isolating me, but she had actually cleared away the people who would have encouraged me to accept a compromise that fell short of full accountability. Now I had nothing left to lose and no relationships left to preserve. The gloves were about to come off completely. Just when Madison thought she had successfully dismantled my case and isolated me from all support, an unexpected ally emerged who would change everything. Detective Rita Morales from the Financial Crimes Division had been quietly investigating Madison's activities as part of a broader probe into fraudulent event businesses operating without proper licenses in Napa County. Miss Blackwood, Detective Morales said during our first meeting, "Your sister's operation caught our attention months ago through routine tax audits. We have been building a case against multiple illegal event businesses, and Madison's activities represent one of the most sophisticated examples we have encountered." Detective Morales explained that the investigation had begun when several legitimate event venues complained about unfair competition from unlicensed operators who could offer lower prices by avoiding taxes, insurance requirements, and safety regulations. Madison's business had generated numerous complaints from both competitors and clients who had discovered they had no legal recourse when problems arose. What makes your sister's case particularly serious is the identity theft and document forgery involved in accessing your trust fund. Detective Morales continued, "This is not just a family dispute about money. This is organized fraud that could result in federal charges if the financial crimes cross state lines." The detective had been gathering evidence independently of my efforts, using resources and investigative techniques that far exceeded what my civilian alliance could accomplish. Bank surveillance footage showed Madison forging documents and impersonating me during phone calls. Digital forensics had recovered deleted files from her computer, revealing detailed plans to expand her illegal business operations. Most importantly, Detective Morales had discovered Madison's connections to a broader network of fraudulent operators. She had been sharing strategies with other people running similar scams, exchanging advice about forging documents, manipulating family members, and avoiding detection by authorities. This was not an isolated case of sibling betrayal. Madison was part of an organized effort to exploit family relationships and property inheritance laws. "Your sister was planning something much bigger than just stealing your villa," Detective Morales revealed. "We found communications where she discussed targeting other young people studying abroad whose families owned valuable properties. She was essentially running a handbook on how to exploit absent family members. The evidence was overwhelming and professionally documented in ways that would be impossible for Madison's lawyers to discredit or dismiss. Detective Morales had surveillance footage, digital records, witness testimony from other victims, and documentation of Madison's broader criminal network. This was no longer a civil dispute that could be settled privately. This was a criminal case with implications for multiple victims across several states. But the most devastating evidence came from Madison's own communications. The detective had obtained warrants for her phone and computer records, revealing text message conversations where she bragged about manipulating me and planning to frame me for the property damage she had caused. "She called you pathetically naive for trusting family," Detective Morales said, showing me printed screenshots of Madison's messages. "She told her friends that you were too focused on your studies to pay attention to what was happening at home, making you the perfect victim for long-term financial exploitation." Reading Madison's actual words about me was more painful than discovering the theft itself. She had not just stolen my money. She had been actively mocking my trust and planning to destroy my reputation if I tried to seek justice. The sister I had defended and supported throughout our childhood viewed me with contempt and saw my love for her as weakness to be exploited. The investigation also revealed that Madison had been preparing to flee the country if her plans were discovered. She had been researching international banking laws in countries without extradition treaties with the United States. The real estate consultation documents were just the first step in a plan to liquidate all accessible assets and disappear permanently. "Your public social media campaign actually prevented her from completing the fraud," Detective Morales explained. "She was approximately 6 weeks away from having enough liquid assets to relocate permanently. Your exposure of her activities froze her timeline and prevented her from accessing additional resources." This revelation reframed everything I thought I knew about Madison's motivations. This was not desperation or poor judgment. This was a calculated long-term plan to steal everything I would inherit and destroy my ability to pursue accountability. She had been planning to let me return from London to find my inheritance gone and my family convinced that I was lying about the theft. Detective Morales introduced me to other victims of Madison's network. Jennifer Walsh had returned from military deployment to find her inherited family ranch being used for illegal hunting expeditions, with all profits disappearing into accounts controlled by her brother. Marcus Thompson discovered that his trust fund had been drained while he was completing medical residency training with his sister, claiming the money was needed for family emergencies that never existed. "The pattern is always the same," Detective Morales explained. "They target family members who are temporarily absent or focused on demanding careers or education. They exploit family loyalty and trust to gain access to financial resources, then systematically drain those resources while building narratives that portray the victims as selfish or neglectful." Meeting other victims was both validating and heartbreaking. We had all experienced the same gaslighting, the same manipulation of family relationships, and the same systematic destruction of our financial security. But we had also all struggled with the same guilt and self-doubt, wondering if we were overreacting to what could be characterized as family disputes. The hardest part was realizing that my own family believed her version of events, Jennifer shared during our support group meeting. She had spent years building this narrative that I was selfish and materialistic, so when I tried to report the theft, everyone thought I was just being vindictive. The support group became my new alliance, but this time it was built on shared experience rather than individual favor. We understood each other's pain in ways that well-meaning friends never could. We had all lost family relationships along with financial security, and we were all fighting for justice in systems that often treat family fraud as civil rather than criminal matters. Detective Morales helped us coordinate our cases to maximize the legal impact. Madison's prosecution would be strengthened by demonstrating her participation in a broader pattern of similar crimes. The evidence from other cases would prevent her lawyers from dismissing my situation as an isolated family conflict that got out of hand. "Your sister's network kept detailed records because they thought family loyalty would protect them from prosecution," Detective Morales explained. "They documented their strategies, shared victim information, and even celebrated successful thefts. Their own communications will be the strongest evidence against them. As the criminal case solidified, I realized that Madison had made a crucial miscalculation in her strategy. By successfully isolating me from my original allies, she had forced me to seek help from law enforcement professionals who could not be intimidated or bought off. Detective Morales had no personal relationship with Madison to preserve, no business interest to protect, and no family dynamics to consider. The detective was motivated solely by justice and professional duty, making her incorruptible in ways that my civilian allies had not been. Madison's greatest tactical victory in destroying my original support network had actually connected me with the one ally who could ensure complete accountability. But the most satisfying moment came when Detective Morales informed me that Madison's attempts to silence her original victims had created additional charges. The threats against Elena James and Derek constituted witness intimidation, which carried serious penalties independent of the original fraud charges. "Your sister did not just steal from you," Detective Morales said with satisfaction. "She obstructed justice trying to cover it up. That overconfidence is going to cost her everything." The final confrontation came on a crisp December morning in the Napa County Courthouse. Madison arrived with her expensive legal team still maintaining the facade of wounded innocence she had perfected over months of public manipulation. She wore a conservative dress and minimal makeup, clearly coached by her attorneys to project vulnerability and remorse. But Detective Morales and the prosecution team were ready with evidence that would demolish any attempt at sympathy or mitigation. The case had expanded beyond my individual situation to encompass Madison's entire criminal network, with victims testifying from across 3 states about systematic family fraud operations. Madison's face went white when the prosecutor began reading her own text messages aloud in court. Messages where she called me pathetically trusting and bragged about bleeding dry the Princess Fund while she plays student abroad. His messages where she detailed plans to frame me for property damage and claim I had abandoned family responsibilities. Messages where she celebrated successfully manipulating our parents into believing her version of events. The defendant viewed her sister's trust and love as weaknesses to be exploited, the prosecutor stated clearly. This was not a desperate person making poor decisions under pressure. This was a calculated predator who targeted her own family member for systematic financial abuse. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank surveillance footage showed Madison forging my signature dozens of times. Digital forensics revealed deleted files detailing her plans to sell my inheritance and flee the country. Witness testimony from her criminal network partners proved this was part of a broader conspiracy to exploit family relationships for financial gain. When Madison finally took the stand in her own defense, her carefully constructed narrative completely collapsed under cross-examination. She could not explain the forged documents, could not justify the unauthorized business operations, and could not account for the missing trust fund money beyond vague claims about property maintenance expenses. Most damaging was when the prosecutor asked her about the text messages mocking my financial struggles while she spent stolen money on designer clothes and luxury experiences. Madison's mask finally slipped, completely revealing the contempt and entitlement that had motivated years of betrayal. "My sister always had everything handed to her," Madison snapped. "The trust fund, the villa, everyone's approval and support. I was just taking what should have been shared equally between us anyway." That statement sealed her fate. The jury heard Madison openly admit that she felt entitled to steal my inheritance because she resented my achievements and our grandmother's love for me. There was no remorse, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just bitter jealousy and a sense that she deserved what she had stolen. The sentencing was everything I had hoped for, and more. Madison received 4 years in federal prison for financial fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy charges. She was ordered to pay complete restitution for the stolen trust fund money, plus damages for property destruction. Her illegal business assets were seized and liquidated to compensate victims across multiple cases. But the legal victory was only part of the justice I experienced. The trial had exposed Madison's true character to everyone who had previously supported her or criticized my pursuit of accountability. Family members who had pressured me to accept her settlement offer were forced to confront the evidence of her calculated betrayal and complete lack of remorse. My parents finally called to apologize, acknowledging that they had been manipulated by Madison's lies and should have supported me from the beginning. Derek, my cousin, who had betrayed our alliance for money, returned Madison's payment and offered to testify about her attempts at witness intimidation. Even Elena reached out to express regret about abandoning the case when Madison threatened her business. But the most meaningful relationships came from my new chosen family, the support group of Madison's victims, who had become genuine friends and advocates for each other. Jennifer Marcus and I maintained close contact, supporting each other through the ongoing legal processes and the emotional recovery from family betrayal. Detective Morales became an ongoing mentor, helping me understand how family fraud cases work and connecting me with resources for other victims. She explained that prosecution of these crimes often fails because victims are reluctant to pursue justice against family members, making my willingness to seek full accountability crucial for protecting future victims. The villa was eventually restored to its original condition, using the restitution money from Madison's assets and insurance claims. I decided to honor grandmother's memory by creating a scholarship fund for young women studying international business, ensuring that her legacy would support education rather than being destroyed by family greed. But the most profound change was internal. I had learned to distinguish between family loyalty and enabling destructive behavior. I understood that protecting someone from consequences is not love. It is actually preventing them from learning and growing from their mistakes. Madison's supporters had argued that pursuing criminal charges would destroy her future, but her future had been built on stolen money and deliberate cruelty towards someone who loved her. Real justice meant ensuring she faced appropriate consequences for her choices while preventing her from harming other victims. The experience taught me that chosen family, people who support you based on shared values and genuine care, is often more reliable than blood relationships that are taken for granted or exploited. Detective Morales. My victim support group and the friends who stood by me during the crisis proved more trustworthy than the sister I had defended my entire life. Looking back, I realized that Madison's greatest mistake was underestimating my capacity for persistence when fighting for justice. She expected me to give up when the personal costs became high, just as our family had always expected me to be the bigger person and forgive her behavior for the sake of peace. But some betrayals are too calculated and destructive to be forgiven without complete accountability. Madison needed to face consequences not just for what she stole from me, but for what she had planned to steal from future victims. Her prosecution sent a clear message that family fraud would be treated as seriously as any other financial crime. The final irony was that Madison's attempt to destroy my inheritance and reputation ultimately strengthened my character and expanded my chosen family in ways she never could have anticipated. Her betrayal taught me valuable lessons about trust, justice, and the difference between enabling and supporting that will serve me for the rest of my life. As I settled into the restored villa that winter, I realized that grandmother's legacy had been preserved not just in the property itself, but in the values she had taught me about standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult. Madison had tried to steal that legacy, but she had actually helped me understand its true value. To everyone watching this story, I want to ask you something important. Have you ever experienced family betrayal, where people expected you to forgive and forget for the sake of keeping peace? Have you ever been told that pursuing justice against family members makes you vindictive or cruel? Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hold people accountable for their actions, even when they share your DNA. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life justice stories. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that family loyalty should never protect people from facing consequences for deliberate cruelty. Drop a comment telling me about your own experiences with choosing justice over false peace. I read every single response. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey toward accountability and healing. Remember that standing up for yourself is not selfish, and protecting others from future harm is one of the most loving things you can do. Until next time, keep fighting for the justice you deserve even when the people who should support you choose to look the other way instead.